Welcome back. This is your Gaza War sit rep. I believe we're on day 93. These sit reps understand guerrilla warfare and don't devalue or disdain Arab military abilities. The question of the day is, does Hamas use human shields? The answer is no, and we are going to explain why. This time, I have John Elmer with me. Hey, John.
Hey, Justin, thanks for having me.
And you are most welcome. Anyone who's awake at this time is most welcome. And you are a
I'm
night
always that
owl.
one.
So I wanted to, there's a couple of events before we talk about our main question. The Hezbollah said that they, as part of their reprisal for the assassination of Aruri in Lebanon, they targeted a one of two that exist in Israel, air traffic control. So it's another one of these sensors, some presumably incredibly expensive sensor system that they use to monitor all air traffic um, over northern Israel and the environs, presumably. And it was hit with a ATGM. It was not intercepted, and it did significant damage to the system. And it's in keeping with what Hezbollah has been doing in terms of destroying sensors and surveillance equipment and just constantly targeting that. And apparently Israel put a balloon in the air to compensate for the loss of this. So they didn't want to be blinded by this. So they immediately put a balloon in the air. The other thing is there was an explosion in Haifa, which the Iraqi resistance is claiming. If you look at a map of that, you see that Haifa is quite some ways from Iraq. So it's a pretty long range missile. So I just wanted to throw those two. Did you see anything else today that you want to make sure we
I
cover?
mean, the West Bank is on fire
Oh
too.
my God, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think in the north, Hezbollah has, I mean, two things that it demonstrated is one, that they're aware of these things. They're aware of these more or less secret installations that are clearly integral to Israel's constant war aims,
Yeah.
and they're hitting those. So that's interesting. And also, it's a shaping of the battlefield. They're
Yeah.
shaping the battlefield for, um, you know,
Yeah.
inviting Israel to continue to escalate this war. They're obviously very careful,
Mhm.
um, extraordinarily patient,
Yeah.
like historically patient. But yeah, the attacks that they're doing are clearly they're aware of where to hit,
Mhm.
and also that they're shaping for the future. And I think I think the sort of the great unknown with Hezbollah is that their capacity since 2006 has increased so significantly,
Yeah.
but we've never seen it, and
Yeah.
neither has Israel. But the ability to strike with precision guided missiles, the anti-tank missile work that they've done along the border for the last
Mhm.
90 days is really impressive. With anti-tank missiles, but they have guided missile systems
Yeah.
that can bring just hell down on Israel very quickly. And um, yeah, it's not clear that this brinksmanship is beneficial to Israel, but I
Yeah.
guess we'll probably get into that.
What I said in a previous briefing is it's almost like they want to lose so that the US has to intervene. So they're trying to create a situation that they cannot get out of without US intervention in the hope that by doing that, the US will intervene. And I just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of unwise decision making, it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean that's the
Um,
World War III formula.
yeah, that's the World War III formula. The other thing I noticed, like you were talking about how patient they are, and that note that um is such an important word because it's like there's this tit for tat revenge based like warfare that Israel is always thinking of. Like we're gonna do something and they're gonna pay for it, and then they're gonna do something to make us pay for it, and then we're gonna make them pay. And that's like how they understand it. But the way that these retaliations are, it's like you've just did this appalling thing that cries out for revenge, and in response we've made your entire military system one increment weaker. in destroying something that's very hard to repair or replace. And
quickly, especially, right?
yeah, yeah. So it's like it's a very, you can see that there's two totally different mentalities at work here. Now, uh okay, if
Do you think that the Americans are, what do you think the Americans are saying to the Israelis? Like, this is what people keep asking me,
I
that
don't
like,
get the sense
there's no
that
way
there's
the Americans are saying do this.
I don't get the sense that there's very much of that kind of communication. Like I think because my feeling, I don't know, I don't have inside information in that sense, but my feeling is that the Israelis have been given the impression that they can do what they like, and the Americans have given them the impression that we're not going to tell you what to do or coordinate what to do. You ask us for things and we'll give them to you. But I also think the flip side of that is I don't think the Americans are going to come riding to their rescue. I don't think they have the means to do that. If if Israel were to start a ground war with Hezbollah, I don't think Americans are, well, what are they going to do? They're going to parachute in? Are they going to, what I've never been able to understand. It's the same weapon systems. It's human beings have the same two hands. They have the same gear. And I gather that the Americans give more expensive gear per human soldier to the Israelis than they have themselves. So I don't really understand that unless there's some kind of mystique or magic around Americans being there. I don't I don't see an intervention saving them either.
Yeah, I mean it's I mean, yeah, I mean this is game theory, I guess,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the yeah, the it's presumable that Hezbollah's first operation against the Israelis in that type of war would be to knock out their air power,
yeah.
their like
Airfields. Yeah,
airfields,
yeah,
and that the necessity of then having these aircraft carriers off the coast, I guess, participate in the destruction
yeah.
faster.
But I also, I mean, I
But
don't
they're
know.
targets as well.
We should, yeah, A, their targets as well. And B, I haven't looked into it, but I don't know that you can continuously bombard a place from an aircraft carrier the way you can from ground-based airfields that you are utterly secure about and
And
never.
that's what the guided missile systems give the that gives Hezbollah the capability to do that,
Yeah.
that has never existed before.
Hmm.
And Israel's never faced that kind of precision, the ability to have precision guided systems. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, look at how much intelligence Qassam had about the about the Gaza division.
Yeah.
And just think about if you were able to apply, like they applied it with their hands and feet and with some trucks, but if you were to
Hmm.
apply 500 kilo warheads, like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that land where they're supposed to land
Yeah.
and can be fired all kind of at once, Israel becomes a very small
It's
country
a very
once a
scary.
rocket war.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was watching Elijah Magnier on Rania Khalek's show, and he was talking about how a lot of the missiles that Hezbollah has from Iran, presumably, are meant for longer ranges than the distance between Lebanon and Israel. So they can you can go longer with a smaller payload, but if you have such a short distance, you can add even more explosive to those missiles and make them even more impactful.
And if
Um,
Qassam is doing that under the ground in the
yeah,
besieged Gaza Strip,
yeah,
what is Hezbollah doing when they've had now more than a decade
mountainsides.
of
Yeah,
a land corridor between Iran, shuffling this capability across constantly?
and
Uh,
I also don't think that this siege of Gaza will continue to be fully sealed um, the longer this war goes on. And they're going to be able to get new stuff. And they're probably going to start to get stuff into the West Bank. Like, I really think that all bets are off in terms of the total control of Israel of borders and their ability to seal off parts of Palestinian territories
they're
from one another.
dropping more unexploded
Yeah.
bombs on
Yeah.
Gaza right now than
Yeah.
you could import
Yeah.
with any kind of smuggling
That
corridor,
too.
no matter how fruitful it was, right? They're
Yeah.
dropping 2,000-pound bombs that aren't detonating,
Yeah.
that carry hundreds and hundreds of kilos of payload
Yeah.
that just get pulled out of them like kind of like a Pez dispenser. And
Yeah.
then it's just like that's so much. And then even the metal around the
Yeah.
bombs, like the big just like chunks of metal, that's very useful material, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if
Yeah.
you heard that story about them about Qassam diving off the coast to try to get the metal
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
the
You've
war.
told that
Like they're just
story.
doing like they dove down to I guess a World War II
Hmm.
warship that sunk off the coast of Gaza in order to get the heavy metals
Yeah.
um, to reappropriate them, right?
Some of those, one of the latest atrocity videos that Israeli soldiers are proudly circulating on TikTok is an Israeli soldier saying, "Ah ha ha, see, this is why you don't have engineers because we're blowing up your universities, hardy har har," and then they blow up some university somewhere, and it's like, you think a university is a building? You think you think not having a building has stopped them from learning stuff? Like, they just haven't. It's like how little they know about Palestinians that in Gaza that they've had every reason to know. They should have. Maybe that guy doesn't know it, but other people know it. But he's making the video and he's bragging about blowing up a building.
Is that even making the news in North America? Do
No,
people that are listening to this know that Israel went around and systematically blew up all of the schools and shut down all of the hospitals? It's not
listening
clear.
to
Like I listen to CBC every day. It's not clear to me that the average person knows that that's true. That
speaking
they
of,
like went in
yeah,
and wired the school,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
They
They
didn't
and they
drop a
made
bomb
videos of
on
that.
it.
Yeah,
And then
and
they
they
make
made
videos of it.
yeah. Um, Speaking of, I saw some scary headlines on the news today. There was a headline on City TV um where they said Israel says they've dismantled the military infrastructure in the north and they're going to focus on the south. And first of all, no, they haven't. And but when they say they're going to focus on the south, that's a little bit more frightening because presumably that means they're going to try to do in the south what they did in the north, which is destroy all the hospitals and flatten all the buildings and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, also that when they're talking about in the north, they're talking about their ground forces. They're trying to get away for their ground forces to get out. But there was just another massacre in Jabalia today, which is, the
Mm-hmm.
area that Israel said that they first had total control over, like
Yeah,
literally weeks ago now.
yeah,
And they're still carrying out massacres that are basically all women and children
yeah,
in the north. And they did it in the south as well. Of course, they're doing uh, that they've lowered their intensity of the bombing,
right.
but it's still historically high for
Yeah.
warfare, for 21st century warfare, for
Well, somebody made a map. I'll see if I can get it for one of the future episodes. But it was like all the explosives dropped on Vietnam and all the explosives dropped on Gaza. And I think there's a little bit less on Gaza than in Vietnam, but they also showed the sizes, the relative sizes of the two countries, and obviously Gaza's tiny, tiny, tiny compared to
in
Vietnam.
such a short period of time. Like
Yeah,
Vietnam, they're probably talking about a 7-year window, if
yeah,
not more, in a much bigger country. I mean, yeah.
So
Like the World Food Program said today that 80% of the world's catastrophic famine,
yeah.
8 out of 10 are in the Gaza Strip. And it's been a man-made.
Yeah, which is they're bulldozing agricultural fields. We used to remember when we used to get upset about the strawberries that were rotting at the checkpoint because they wouldn't let them out, and now they're bulldozing the fields and bombing the fields and bombing the fishing boats, and I mean it's not just
How many
destroying.
billion people are in the
Yeah,
world right now? 8 billion?
yeah,
To create 80% of the catastrophic famine in one place is a shocking, in a
yeah,
war of shocking atrocities.
yeah, and they brag about that too. Um, so I wanted to show some data to talk about this question of whether Hamas uses human shields. And there's like a logical part, which is logic alone. almost any amount of knowledge in any field, including just pure logic, can solve this problem for you. But let's look at some data and then we'll talk about the logic after. So I made a little pivot table of attacks. This is December 7th to the 31st, and just showing like how many attacks the resistance counts very roughly in different parts of Gaza. And so there's lots of parts, but what I wanted to do was look at like the big numbers, and the biggest number is various, which is not really a, there's these summaries of summaries, but I looked at these. So there's Beit Lahia, Burej camp, Shujaiya, Gaza City in general, Jabalia camp, where you just mentioned there was a massacre, Sheikh Radwan, Khan Yunis. So I took these, I got the locations out of Google Maps, and then I made a map of where these attacks are. And I'm going to show that in a second. So I made this little map. And so these numbers, there's these stars, and then there's these numbers. I should have used triangles or something, but I used red stars. And this is like the number of attacks in December in these different places. So there's a huge number in Khan Yunis because that's just, a summary. But like you can see all of these places. And my point is this: all of these like these two are places where the Israelis went in and they kind of made a drive to the beach, and then they were trying to surround Gaza. So early on, they said, we're cutting Gaza in two. We're going to finish off the north, and we're going to then go to the south. So they made this drive, and there's December. There's huge numbers of attacks in these exact areas. And then Gaza City, which is the north, where they said all the civilians were supposed to have left, and lots of them did, but not all of them, but lots of them were supposed to have left. This is like the buffer zone, whatever, Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and then all over Gaza City, but like these kind of main alleyways, they call them different axes, but it's like these alleyways and axes, I mean, not alleyways, but like main highways and axes, and they're constantly fighting here. So my point is, these are not Hamas embedded with civilians being rooted out by these bombings and attacks. These are battlefields that Israel has supposedly cleared of civilians. And now is when Hamas is really hitting them there. Hamas is specifically hitting, or the resistance, I should say, the resistance is specifically hitting them over and over in those places where civilians are not. And these are attacks that are chosen by the resistance. These are decisions, these are attacks where they're deciding where they fight, and they're attacking. If you've seen the videos, they're attacking armored vehicles, they're attacking armored bulldozers, they're attacking APCs, they're attacking soldiers inside buildings.
These are major engagements that we're seeing here for sure. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, these are battles on, I would say it's an urban battlefield. This is not people hiding. This is not the resistance hiding among civilians. And the other point, and the logic point, is that they hide in tunnels. The civilians are not in the tunnels. The resistance is in the tunnels. So the idea, and Israel has always known that Hamas is in the tunnels, or the resistance is in the tunnels. They're always advertising that they're in the tunnels. They say, you're welcome to come to the tunnels. We have a welcoming committee ready for you, whatever. They've made all kinds of taunts.
Yeah, 2 tunnel booby traps today.
Yeah. So it's simply the opposite of the truth to say that they hide among civilians and use human shields. They are a military that goes out of their way to not hide among civilians.
Yeah, I mean, the civilians are their families. Like that's the other part that's just like, Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's changing the subject to say compare that to the way the Israelis integrate their civilians in with, like I just spent the last couple of nights going through October 7th videos, and the level of integration between the Israeli civilians and the civilian security forces and the IDF in Israel is unbelievable. Like we know that they were sending WhatsApp messages to helicopter gunships on October 7th, like sending in, like the integration is just, it's incredible. The fences are all connected. The way the whole Gaza envelope functions is
Yeah,
completely embedded with civilians. And then of course their army is, they always say it all the time, like everybody has to serve in their army. So they're already
right.
embedding their army in their civilians by doing that. They drive in civilian cars and buses to get them down to their bases. All of the Israeli military, brass are all set up inside civilian neighborhoods, um,
Yeah,
and they put their people out on October 7th out on the front line to get destroyed without ever coming to their help at all. They didn't even count their bodies for, in some cases, for months. And
yeah,
so, yeah, I mean, the two juxtapositions are really stark. I mean, Israel just says that they hide behind civilians because they're massacring tens of
ah,
thousands of people, right? So when
yeah,
the BBC, who always has an Israeli on to explain every single massacre,
yeah,
um,
and
yeah,
and, and
they say it's because there's civilians there. There shouldn't have been civilians there
right.
when we dropped hundreds of 1,000 pound and 2,000 pound bombs on a neighborhood, which have blast radiuses, right, of like hundreds of
Yeah.
meters. Um, and
And
so yeah, they're committing these heinous massacres and then saying, well, it's because the civilians were there, even though they're targeting the civilians in the places they're supposed to go.
they're targeting them in the south. So this is my last point. So if you look at the battles again, if you look at the map of where the fighting is, there's where the fighting is, and I'll have to make one day a map of where the bombings are. Take a look at where, if you get a chance to take a look at where the bombings are, the
Yeah.
Israelis have started bombing much more intensely in the south. You'll see bombings in Khan Yunis, bombings in Rafah. These are in the south, and the fighting is in the north. So
Bombing the refugee camps that just got set up, the
yeah,
tents that were just set up, they bombed them yesterday.
so they're following
They're
the
following the
civilians.
civilians.
They're following the civilians and bombing the civilians, all the while claiming that the resistance, which has gone out of their way to avoid civilians by going entirely underground, and then fighting in areas where you don't have these clusters of civilians.
Yeah. And one
So
of the reasons why the Khan Yunis attacks is so much is because it's such a large area. If you put the Gaza City map up,
mhm.
you
Yeah,
and you overlay it with the bomb damage, you
yeah,
can see they basically bombed a highway down the coast. So they
mhm,
came around the top and then came down and bombed all the way down the coast, which they're still
yeah,
fighting, like 35 in there. That's probably Shati camp, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then the other axes in the middle, there's actually two of them. They're now trying to split the middle camps off. So they're going
mm,
to split the middle camps off from Gaza, down below 20 there to go straight across.
right,
And then below 14 and is going to be another corridor that's going to cut Khan Yunis off from the middle camps. But they told people to go to the middle camps. That's where
yeah,
they told that that's Wadi Gaza, just up there a little further. Like that's where they told people to go.
yeah,
Yeah, right there. That's where they told people they would be safe if they went behind that line. And now it's the sharp end of the spear of their invasion.
right,
Whereas in the north, they're apparently winding down the fight. When if you were intending to clear out the civilians to clear a battlefield, that's
right.
what's been created now that you're fighting. And now that's when they're sending them home.
And they're leaving from here because of this. They're leaving from here because of all these
Yeah,
cuts,
because
these
that's Gaza
thousand
City, what
cuts.
you're
Yeah,
seeing there. The
exactly.
concentration of numbers is basically all around Gaza City. And right now, there's really fierce fighting in Tufa and Daraj, which is on the north, like just around the 16 there, just
Yeah,
above
it's
it.
here. Yeah,
Yeah. So there's a ton of fighting there because that's basically one of the entrances into the city. They're
Yeah.
fighting in Shujaiya, they're fighting in Zaytun, they're fighting in Sheikh Radwan.
Hmm.
These are the edges of the city.
Yeah.
And if you overlay the bomb map, you'll see that they pre-bombed everywhere that they moved, right?
Yeah.
So they bombed all the way down the coast. There's nothing on the coast anymore. It's basically a highway, and that's where we've seen them use jeeps because they've essentially created so much destruction that they've moved people back. And I guess that's what their plan is, that they're going to stay in the buffer zone and then just continually attack from the buffer zone, because that's essentially where you see those concentrations of numbers. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see on that map the green area. Like the thing about Gaza is it's densely populated in the built up areas, but it's also farmland and desert all around it. So it's possible for Israel to move through those buffer zones um, and
Right.
be more
But
or
they're,
less out of reach of the
but
resistance. But the videos that we're seeing in the middle area
yeah,
are the Palestinians using tunnels to come up
exactly.
inside the buffer zone.
The longer they stay, the more of that there is. And the way that Nasrallah broke it down, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, where he described how the Israelis can't evacuate the area. They have to stay there and take those hits, because if they leave, then they fear that Hezbollah will be able to move into that vacuum. And the same goes for these buffer zones. They're going to have to stay there and take continuous hits from the resistance.
In order
And
to move them back like 500 meters,
yeah,
it's so absurd when they
but
have 200.
all they'll do is get close enough. Like you either keep your men there to take the hits, or you give up that territory to
And they'll see that as a defeat, right? Like
yeah,
that so that it's not clear strategically what
where this
Israel's
is
up to
going.
here.
Yeah.
But a war of attrition is to me, I would have said on October 6th that that's the last kind of war that Israel wanted to fight,
Yeah.
a war of attrition. If you're just going to go in and kill 50,000 people, there's no point in stretching that out over months and months when they're not actually, like, these terms saying that they're demob or degraded or defeated, dismantled Qassam.
Oh,
It's ludicrous.
yeah.
There's nobody that believes that. There's
Yeah.
not like a whole community of military experts that believe that. There's just not. Like the Institute for the Study of War, which is,
Hmm.
no
As
left,
pro-Israel as can
yeah,
come.
as you
Yeah,
can
as you can.
get. And
Yeah.
they believe that 3 out of 30 Qassam battalions are combat ineffective. So, and they say 30, so that's 30,000 troops. I think there's more than that.
More.
And they're saying
Absolutely.
that 3 are combat ineffective. And you know what combat ineffective means? It means that they can
20%.
form as a guerrilla force, which is
Yeah.
like basically what they are. And also, it's not a permanent condition, it's a temporary
Right.
condition. So they can reconstitute themselves. And because they have a regular order of battle, they can reconstitute themselves instantly,
Yeah.
like really instantly, and move troops and form battalions out of, battalions that have been targeted. But we haven't seen any evidence of that. We haven't seen
No.
any evidence of tens of resistance fighters killed in single spots.
No. They've
Nothing that would add up to thousands, let
they've
alone the
yeah.
8,000 they say. But even 8,000 out of 40,000,
It's
that's
nowhere
just
near.
Qassam, too.
It's nowhere
There's all
near
those other
8,000.
factions, and they're
Yeah.
counting any man that they've
Yeah.
killed.
Any man.
So even by the Israeli metrics, like that, the counting statistics that they love so much, um, it's not
It's
clear
not.
strategically what they're doing. And then now they've said for all these months that they're fighting this war till the end, and if they can't win, then they can't live in the Middle East. And
Why are they saying these things?
why are they saying these
Why
things?
are they
It's
saying this?
very
I
surprising.
have one last question for you. Let's leave with this one question for you, because I've been sending you Seymour Hersh's articles, and it kind of hit me today that Seymour Hersh's articles, where he described how Sinwar was going to surrender, he was going to
Bring
surrender
all the prisoners. He's going to
uh,
bring all the prisoners to Shifa and surrender,
to Shifa.
and then get exiled.
And so that was obviously like some form of wishful thinking. But my question, I never got to ask you this. Do you think that they thought there was a command center under Al Shifa?
That's a good question. That's a good
I'm
question.
starting to think they really did think that. I'm starting to think they really did think that, and they were devastated to find out that there wasn't.
They
And
said that they
maybe
found Dave's wheelchair under one of the hospitals, and they said that he had lost three
they,
arms,
they
or
found a they
three
found
of
a
his four
wheelchair
arms
at
and
a
legs.
hospital.
And then they just published a photo of him with where he looks like he's got
Fine.
two arms, he's got all his hands, he's very much not like the Israelis have described him for a decade. So why would they release that?
Or maybe
Some of the
they're
things they're
on an
doing are
ongoing
baffling.
basis convincing themselves of lies. I don't know. I just there's something
That they at least
really.
know what he looks like to kill him, I guess, because previously they were showing us his like graduation photo from
Mhm.
the 80s or whatever, right? Like,
Nobody
and now at
knows.
least maybe they know what he looks like. So if they like literally
How
come
how
across
how
him
did
in a
they
tunnel,
how would they know what he looks like? How do they know
I don't
that?
know. Well, they're releasing some of this information that they like they've bragged about having you know, whatever it is, hundreds of terabytes, or I don't know, the
Okay.
number's so big, I don't know what it is, but it's enormous amounts of data that they said they've collected. But there's no indication of there. I mean, there's been some indication. They showed that incredible tunnel in the north that was uh, that
Oh
that
yeah, that
footage
was already.
was
Then they and Kassam said it's too you're too late. We've
yeah, you're too
accomplished our mission.
late, but even still, like just them showing that was incredible. Um, yeah, there's no indication that even if they like came face to face in the tunnels with these guys, that their fighters know who they are.
No,
Um, they have
no,
no human intelligence in Gaza at all, right?
no.
And that's a tribute to the resistance. The
Yeah,
Qassam Brigades began as a counterintelligence organization. Sinwar led it
yeah,
to root out collaborators. They've built this internal closed uh,
yeah,
communications network at great diligence to
yeah.
keep the Israelis out, and the Israelis just have no idea. Like they've been doing this for 90 days and they haven't found any of their any of their people. And when you hear about these people that get released, like they describe living with families in Gaza. Like the one girl that
Yeah.
got released the other day said she was like putting her fingers out the window, hoping someone would recognize her tattoos. Like they're right there. And
Yeah.
I mean, look at in Shujaiya when they killed their own
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
They're right there, and they
Yeah.
have no idea what they're looking at, even when it's their own guys writing SOS in Hebrew on the walls. They just have no intelligence at all. And the kind of intelligence you would need to fight this sort of war, I don't know. And it's not in those terabytes because the things that they've shown, they showed a map yesterday of the tunnels that was like on the back of an envelope that had like a line and a circle and a line and a circle. Like it looked like
Yeah.
you scribbled it at a restaurant on the back of a napkin. Even in the tunnel networks that they've put together, like they've published some 3D images of like
Yeah.
tunnels that they've assembled,
Animations. Yeah.
and
Like
they're
that's like that.
clearly
That's like
not
the
even
animation we all saw of the hospital. I mean,
but
what
it's
is that?
clearly not even a fraction of what we know exists, right?
Yeah.
Like they're talking about being in tunnels that are 10 and 20 meters deep. We know that
Right.
there's an entire 80-meter deep
Right.
network, and if not
Bunkers.
deeper.
Yeah.
And so to say you're in 20 meters, you're basically in someone's basement. You
Yeah.
haven't even begun the war.
Yeah.
And the levels of devastation and deprivation, I don't know, it's difficult to see how Israel comes back from this. Even with this amount of propaganda, even though people that watch CBC every day don't know the Israelis are destroying
Yeah.
schools systematically, or like they probably all remember that time that the Palestinians were said to fire a rocket on a hospital. But they haven't followed along as 28 of the 36 hospitals in the Gaza Strip were systematically dismantled and the
Yeah.
doctors driven out of them and the patients pushed
Sniped,
on
bulldozed in the
and
courtyards.
bulldozed. It's
Well,
dark. It's dark.
Yeah. Absolutely no sign of stopping. Absolutely none.
I mean, no, I don't see it. I mean, Israel has it right there. Like the war could end immediately.
Yeah.
Qassam has said that they would exchange prisoners all for all
Yeah.
immediately. They said that about the civilians.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they could make it part of a comprehensive deal that would probably move Hezbollah off the border in the
They
north.
said it. Nasrallah said it. He said,
Yeah,
if you want to, if you know, the best thing you can do, if you want to go back to your homes in the north, is get a ceasefire in Gaza. So they're
it's right
all
there to
they
be
all
done.
understand it as linked. It's not,
And
these are not separate
that would
conflicts.
bring all of their people home. So
Yeah.
people talk about like, oh, it would be a specter of defeat. That's just a
No.
demented country to view it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
To want to continue industrial level slaughter, artificially intelligence
Yeah.
driven slaughter,
Yeah.
but not bring your people back to your conscripted army who are,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
demented.
they've lost what they're doing it for. They've completely lost any sense of why anybody should fight. And I also think long term that's going to damage them too. There's no mission. It's just killing. I'm just
Yeah, they're just killing right now.
yeah,
They're just killing. And they're not aiming. They don't know where to hit. This
yeah,
idea that they have like a target bank, they're so far beyond their target bank. I mean,
yeah,
they're into the 30,000s of hits in a place
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a tiny little place. And the calculus of massacres just totally goes up, right? Like 80 people in a house today, 80 people in a house. Like
yeah,
that's just unbelievable. Like three school classes full of humans. It's just
yeah, vaporized.
in one moment, day after day. I can't believe that the ground war has gone on this long without
Yeah,
um,
yeah. That's another thing I said the other day. Yeah, two couple days ago. Like Hezbollah won in 2006, having done way less damage than Hamas has done to the Israeli military in the past 90 days. Like the Israeli military has taken more damage in this war than they've ever before, as far in recent history.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they say that like their rehab
Soldiers,
department,
armor.
their
Yeah,
medical departments. There's nothing like that, and there was nothing like October 7th, and that's the foundations for all
yeah,
this. They're clearly lying about their casualties. I
yeah,
think even just a moderate uh, adjustment of their statistics would be it's at least double. They're bragging about 1,000 medevac flights.
yeah,
Um, so that that number right there in modern medicine suggests between 3 and 500
yeah.
minimum, unless they're flying out minor injuries, which
Why would
doesn't
they
seem
do
to
that?
make
Yeah,
any sense at all. So, and the numbers that they've said themselves, right? Like their hospitals have put the number over 10,000 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so, yeah, the damage is considerable,
and
and
they're
they have to
yeah,
draw down the war in the north because they are in the north of Gaza because they can't. They have
yeah,
to replenish their armored vehicles. They have to have some kind of a rotation to get these damaged
hmm,
vehicles. It's not clear how many of these vehicles have been destroyed,
right, right.
but it's very clear that many have been damaged,
Yeah,
and those don't count as
yeah,
destroyed in Israeli statistics, right? If you
yeah,
if you drag it
yeah,
without its treads back to Israel, and then you fix it and it goes back into the field in 2026, it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
count as destroyed. So
Right.
these statistics are very malleable.
Generous. Yeah. Um, all right, let's stop there. You are going to be doing live streams this week,
Yeah, Wednesday this week
Wednesday this week.
on
Okay,
Electronic Intifada.
Wednesday on Electronic Intifada,
New
and
brief episode with Abdel Jawad Omar. We talk
oh,
about the
good,
second Intifada and
awesome,
the roots of the Intifada and
great,
why we shouldn't make arbitrary distinctions between the periods of resistance. And I think the Qassam brigades really show that in the Gaza Strip, the trajectory of the armed struggle,
yeah,
to not necessarily see it as first Intifada, second Intifada,
yeah,
interim period, right? To see it
yeah,
as a continuum.
yeah,
So that was a really great conversation because we got to go into history, which for all this avalanche of information,
hmm,
there's never time to sort of go back, if it seems like, into history, because if you do, you're sacrificing
Yeah.
telling
The
people about something that
constant ongoing. When's that coming out? Is that out?
it's out now. Yeah, you can
Okay.
find it wherever
Okay,
you get
check
your
it out.
podcasts or at thebriefpodcast.com.
Okay. And next we'll see if you're free for the next brief the next sit rep too.
Okay, it was good to see you, Justin.
Thanks, John.
Take care, everybody.